him along with a scholar from the university, and they ran this forum informally for several years at their home. And a number of talks, some nearly 150 talks were organized on a variety of subjects. Then, unfortunately, due to the age and subsequent passing away of one of the professors, it was then decided that we will do it at IAS association level. And fortunately, we have a large number of Jigyasus, people curious to share knowledge and also often be entertained. So we have been carrying on this work with the cooperation of all our friends. So this has been a very interesting experience, particularly during the pandemic when we were able to connect with people. Otherwise, it was impossible to meet people physically. Also in the process, we also came to know several things. Now, I also want to welcome all our association members, all our office bearers, and guests or honored guests from outside who have been good enough to join in this event today. We have a very interesting topic today on Duryodhan, on which Professor Raghunathan has actually written a book. And he's a very interesting character. Mahabharata, of course, is our greatest epic, arguably our greatest epic. One public intellectual, Professor Pratap Bhanu Mehta, was director of CPR and also Vice Chancellor of Ashoka University, was once asked about books, and somebody asked him, if you were to recommend one single book, which one would you recommend for people to read? And he unhesitatingly said that it is Mahabharata. It has all human emotions, it has human psychology, it has human drama, it has philosophy, moral principles, and a whole lot of realism also. So this is a fascinating subject, and Duryodhan is obviously a very fascinating character. So we are all looking forward, sir, to your talk today. I now request our President, Shri Arun Kumar, to kindly initiate the discussion and also formally introduce Professor Raghunathan.
Thank you, Naren. Friends, we are privileged to have today a multifaceted person, Professor V.Raghunathan, in Jigyasa, a forum of our association. We welcome him to this session. A very hearty welcome to you, Professor Saab. After his graduation from Punjab University, Chandigarh, Professor Raghunathan obtained his doctorate in finance from Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta. Professor Raghunathan has been an academic, a banker, author, corporate executive, columnist, and a hobbyist. His academic affiliation was with IIM Ahmedabad as a professor of finance and accounting from 1982 to 2001, and with Bocconi University, Milan, Italy, as a visiting professor from 1989 to 2015. He also headed the Indian campus of Schulich School of Business, York University, Toronto, from 2015 to 2020, where he is presently an adjunct professor. Professor Raghunathan was president of the ING Vyas Bank from 2001 to 2004. He was CEO of the GMR Group from 2005 to 2018. Professor Raghunathan is a columnist of long standing, especially with Economic Times, and has authored over 500 papers and articles. He is author of many books on diverse subjects, including Games Indian Play, Returns to Jammu, The Good Indian Guide to True Jumping, Beyond the Call of Duty, Duryodhan, Locks, Mahabharat and Mathematics, Ganesha on the dashboard, Don't Sprint the Marathon, Corruption Conundrum, Stock Exchanges, Investments and Derivatives. His latest book, Irrationally Rational, has come out this very year. Professor Raghunathan has played chess at the national level and has also done cartooning for some time for a national daily. Collecting old and antique locks has been his serious hobby. He has the largest collection of old and ancient padlocks in India. We are privileged to have amongst us today a very versatile person as Professor Raghunathan. We all know Duryodhan of Mahabharata as a negative character, mainly responsible for the Great War. We are eagerly looking forward to Professor Raghunathan's interpretation of Duryodhan's character and his role in Mahabharata. Professor Raghunathan.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for a very, very gracious introduction and for giving me the honor of talking to venerable members like you all of Jigyasa. It's indeed a pleasure as well as a privilege.
We are privileged to have you here.
My privilege, and please call me Raghu. We will drop the Professor Raghunathan bit. At any point, we can make it more like a chat. It doesn't have to be a talk. Now that said, as you yourself mentioned, I was originally a professor of finance and accounting. To write anything on Mahabharata is a long stretch. And obviously, I'm not a career Mahabharata specialist, so to speak, like some of the authors are. So I wrote it more as a lark because I wrote a book called Locke's Mahabharata and Mathematics, which is an exploration of unexpected parallels. That happened because, as you said, I've also been collecting locks for 35 years. So, that's one of my passionate hobbies, padlocks going back up to 600. I think if everybody muted, it may be a little easier, and switch it on when we are talking. Otherwise, I think there's some disturbance which distracts us. Yeah, thank you. Since I was passionate about these locks, and I knew as much of Mahabharata as any one of us on an average educated Indian knows. So I did a little extra reading, and then I found that there were some very interesting stories in Mahabharata, which had some very interesting parallels with the locks that I had, for instance. And then because I'm a finance professor, I have a passing interest in mathematics. So I found that some of the stories and some of the locks had some, parallel weaving going into mathematics. So I had fun going in and out of Mahabharata, mathematics and locks. And I just had fun writing that book. And this was more like an exercise in parallel thinking or out of the box thinking or whatever, lateral thinking or whatever one calls it. But as it happens, when you have some guests at home and some excess dinner is made, you tend to have it for lunch the next day. And so I had some excess reading that I had done while I was writing this book, Locke's Mahabharata and Mathematics. So I had some excess reading left. So I said, now what do I do with that excess reading? And that was the product which was Duryodhana. Now, as Bhanu Pratap Mehta rightly said, and I agree with him, I call Mahabharata a kind of a universe from which you can mine any human trait. You just decide on which human trait you want to mine out of Mahabharata and you can mine it. And what is beautiful about Mahabharata is that, as you said, arguably or otherwise, one of the most magnificent epics in the world. And it has not been static, it has been dynamic. It was not written in one single book by anyone, but it has been dynamic in the sense it's been evolving as a story with many people contributing to it over millennia. And what we have, there are many interpretations for any, virtually given any one instance, you will find many interpretations of it. So it's a very dynamic kind of an epic. And if we agree that, yes, history is, of course, when I use history, I'm putting it in quotes because I don't believe in mixing up mythology with history. But even as a mythological story, the story has been written by the victors, so to speak, because the entire Mahabharata is more from the point of view of Pandavas as protagonists and Duryodhana and cohorts as villains. So in that sense, I mean that victors write history. I don't mean history in a literal sense of history, because I believe it's an epic, it's mythology, and that is where it should largely remain. That is my personal view. But that said, then I said, okay, listen. When you all right. When you think about all the characters, to me, it appeared that Duryodhana was as grey a character as any of the Pandavas. Now, the reason I say that is very, there are many reasons. So I thought, let me play something like that. All right. I thought, let me play Ram Jethmalani to Duryodhana. If Ram Jethmalani were to represent Duryodhana in the Supreme Court and say that, look, why has he been made such a villain? Manhani ka unpe dawa kar de. Aise kaise Vyas ji ne likh diya Duryodhan ke baare mein. Then we get a different sort of a picture. Okay. So then I said, okay, let us look at it. Duryodhana, the poor guy, was originally, by his parents, he was named Suyodhana. So there you go, right up front. Why he has been called Duryodhana when his original name was Suyodhana, and the history rarely knows him by his original name of Suyodhana. Duryodhana has been painted as wicked, wild, deceitful, cunning, greedy, jealous, abuser of women. I mean, you think of a negative adjective and it seems to apply to Duryodhana. Now, on the contrary, Pandavas come out the exact opposite. The copybook, picture book, good boys. Every mother would like to have them as their sons. They're all about good deeds in life. They're all about love, affection, and followers of dharma, and brave in their countenance, and handsome, good guys. So they are copybook Hollywood heroes. And Duryodhana has been painted the copybook Amrish Puri of the Bollywood. So that's where I started thinking about the entire thing. Now let us look at available facts. Of course, I've added some fictional facts in my writing because, as I said, there is no a static picture of Mahabharata. It is evolving with many authors contributing to it. And I have made my own contribution in some places, though 90% of what I did.
Sir, may I interrupt for a second? I think there is a lot of disturbance. Will everybody kindly mute their mic, please? Otherwise, we can't hear the lecture properly. सब लोग अपना माइक म्यूट कर लें प्लीज।
मनीष को कह दें, सबका म्यूट कर देगा।
मनीष आप म्यूट कर दीजिए।
हाँ, म्यूट कर दीजिए। मनीष you mute it yourself, yeah. That's better. Okay, thank you. Yes, so I was saying, no, not yet. I think the administrator can mute everybody. No. Okay. No. You see, not only in the epic Mahabharata itself, but in its subset, namely Bhagavad Gita, what Lord Krishna preaches to Arjuna, also paints Kauravas, Aka Duryodhana, representative of Kauravas, as a copybook villain. Now, the entire Gita itself is based on the highest dharma. The dharma of a king, the dharma of a Kshatriya, says Lord Krishna to Arjuna, is to safeguard the highest dharma of a king, namely protecting your kingdom. And that is what he says justifies at the point where Arjuna is confused or perplexed about whether he should be killing his cousins and uncles and gurus and so on. No, I think the disturbance is still going on. I don't mind continuing, but you'll have a problem listening to me. I'm getting it very loud actually. Let us see. Okay. All right. Okay, I'll do my best. Okay. So, highest dharma seems to be the bottom line of Bhagavad Gita. Now, let us look at it from the viewpoint of Duryodhana. Duryodhana was Dhritarashtra's son, the eldest son of Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra was the elder son between him and Pandu. Yes, Dhritarashtra was blind, but there was nothing in the regulations of the princely states of those days to say that a blind son could not be king, because otherwise he could not have been king later. However, because he was young and because he was blind, Pandu was placed as a regent. Pandu was a regent because in many interpretations of Mahabharata, Pandu was not a king but a regent of Dhritarashtra in a way. He was presiding over the kingdom in the name of Dhritarashtra, but he was ruling. I'm losing my thread. I'm sorry. Okay. All right.
मनीष आप सबको म्यूट कर दीजिए ना मनीष सबको म्यूट कर दीजिए रोहन मत करिए
Is it a recording sound? I don't know where it's coming from. Okay. Yeah. Right. Now he was Dhritarashtra's son. Dhritarashtra was the elder son. And after a while, Pandu abdicated his kingdom. Pandu could not have children. This was known. And in order to do penance, he went away to Himalayas. He went away to Himalayas because he was confirmed not to be able to have a progeny. Now, subsequently, he died when he was in the Himalayas. Then in the court of the Kauravas, one fine day, in the view of Duryodhana, if Ram Jethmalani were to represent him, he would say, a lady walks in with 5 sons. Not one of those 5 sons is that of Pandus. Not Yudhishthira, not Bhim, not Arjuna, not Nakula, not Sahadeva. 5 boys and 5 brothers, not, 5 fathers, not one of them being Pandu. Pandu was already dead. He was not a reigning king. If you apply the rules of primogeniture, which means the firstborn son of a king should be the ruler, Dhritarashtra qualifies. Okay. What is more, these 5 brothers did not stake a claim on the kingdom as supplicants. They wanted it as a matter of right. But today, imagine if this case goes into the Supreme Court. What would be your view? Now, if Krishna says that highest dharma is to protect your kingdom, I would say that is what Duryodhana was trying to do. He was trying to protect his own kingdom because he knew that Pandavas were very powerful guys. What is more, they had been able to win the goodwill of everyone. They lived on the goodwill of the Kauravas in their fort, in their palaces. Because when Kunti came, she came without anything, just the 5 little boys on top. Now, here is the king who has given some kind of a refuge to his brother's children, who are not actually the brother's children. Brother is only a godfather of sorts. Now, and then these boys say that we have a right on the kingdom. What is the right of Duryodhana in that case? His right obviously will be to protect his kingdom. Now, you might say that he's trying to kill Pandavas in that, in the house of Lac, or he's trying to kill Bhima by drowning him and so on, were bad deeds. But if you look back, even in the Kurukshetra war, there were a whole lot of bad deeds which were done, which you can't justify. At the very least, Duryodhana can say, all right, wait a minute. If I had killed those 5 Pandavas at that time, I would not have killed, there would have been no need to kill millions of people and widow millions of women and orphan millions of children in the Kurukshetra war. So that would have been a far more beneficial killing. As far as killing is concerned, the numbers would have been far fewer. Thirdly, a murder by a king is not called murder. Typically what is murder for a middle-class person, for you and me, when it comes to the kings, it's strategic elimination of opposition. It is strategic elimination of enemies. And, even in war, for instance, you use both stealth as well as open armory to eliminate enemies. So if by stealth, if he wanted to remove his enemies, which you could foresee were definitely going to be a problem for him, you can't find anything which is wrong, for instance, with Duryodhana taking a stand that I will not give an inch or sui ki nok jitna land nahi dunga. Because that was his dharma to protect his kingdom. Kings are supposed to multiply kingdoms and not divide their kingdoms. They're supposed to add to kingdoms and not subtract from kingdoms. And despite all this, you can say Duryodhana did give them their new kingdom to rule, which the Pandavas lost in a game of gambling. Now, Pandavas were not babe in the woods. When they were invited for a game of gambling, after all that 30, the Rajsuya Yagya and so on, why did they accept the invitation and go and play? And even if you were playing, basically Yudhishthira was on an ego trip. Otherwise, why would someone stake his brothers and his own wife, or their collective wife for that matter? So in what way are Pandus any better? They are willing to stake brothers and the wife on a game of gambling, and gambling was a fair game of princely conduct. And yes, in the game of throws, in the game of dice, which there is expertise in throwing. Now, if Shakuni threw the dice better than Yudhishthira, to say that it was a game of cheating, in Duryodhana's view, was not cheating. It was probably more a skillful throw of dice than cheating of dice, because nobody was going to be taken in by, when the whole Sabha is sitting, nobody can overtly cheat. So according to him, both sides were allowed to bring their best thrower of dice, and Shakuni turned out to be the better thrower of dice. So what did Duryodhana do wrong? If the Pandavas chose to lose their kingdom, their brothers, and the wife in the gambling, that again puts Pandavas, if anything, in his eyes worse than it puts Kauravas. Kauravas won, yes, But even then, because Pandavas had a different kind of a image, they were able to turn it around. And then I say in Duryodhana, what about Vastraharan episode? What about the Vastraharan episode? Nothing that we say can justify Vastraharan. And there are some interpretations of Mahabharata which do question whether Vastraharan happened or not. I have chosen to, for instance, I'm going to read one page because we are talking about the book. Just one page I will read out about Duryodhana. See, there is nothing in Mahabharata which in any way says Duryodhana was a bad king. Never does it say that Duryodhana mistreated his subjects. Never is it said that Duryodhana was a womanizer. Never is it said that Duryodhana was a sinful king in his conduct other than his interactions with Pandavas. Okay. Now, if so, what he is saying is, now see, Krishna had hundreds of wives. Arjuna had 4 wives. Duryodhana incidentally had only one wife all his life, Bhanumati. And he narrates one incident. I will read this one page to you. Once returning from court after a long day, I walked into our private chamber. I'm writing Duryodhana as if he's talking in first person. I walked into our private chamber to find Bhanumati and Karna keenly engaged in a game of chopper with substantial stakes. Karna had his back to me while Bhanumati sat facing me. Seeing me enter, Bhanumati tried to stand up, which we both usually did for the other out of respect and affection. But as she was trying to get on her feet, Karna just grabbed for her clothes in a spontaneous move in a bid to prevent her from rising. I would learn later that she was losing heavily and Karna thought she was trying to get away without completing the game, and hence he was trying to stop her from escaping. As he reached out to prevent her from leaving, ऐसे पकड़ के बैठाने की कोशिश की. In a bid to prevent her from rising, I would learn later that she was losing heavily and Karna thought she was trying to get away without completing the game, and hence he was trying to stop her from escaping. As he reached out to prevent her from leaving, her waistband broke and pearls rolled out in all directions. I noticed that Bhanumati stood half bent in mortification as blood rushed to her face, and it took Karna a few moments to realize why Bhanumati was perturbed. And then as realization dawned on him, he turned towards me looking no less distressed and embarrassed. I had a hearty laugh at the two, both of them my best friends, and helped Bhanumati pick up the scattered pearls. To be honest, I was not even aware that I had done anything noteworthy. When you love your wife and trust a friend, you don't do so conditionally. But Bhanumati would somehow always regard my reaction as indicative of my love and trust for her and for Karna, and saw the whole episode as remarkable. She would often tell me that I innately respected women, and that was reason enough for her to be proud of me. Now, anybody who loved his wife so much, and anybody who, when kings were allowed to have as many wives as they wanted, had only one wife all his life, could not have been a disrespecter of women at large. So Vastraharan, so I have given an interpretation of how that Vastraharan transpired, which was a massive misunderstanding or miscommunication thereafter, the history written by the victors sort of a story. In short, the burden of the entire thing is, yes, Duryodhana might have done a lot of things wrong, but Pandavas did a lot of things wrong themselves. A lot of killings which took place on both sides were highly questionable. If Rajadharma was the highest dharma, Rajadharma did not apply only to the Pandavas. The Rajya did not even legitimately belong to the Pandavas to say it was their Rajadharma, because the father was never a king, he was a regent. The children were not legitimate children of the father, and father was not a ruling king at the time when he died. When he died, he was no longer a ruling king. He was already in the Himalayas, having abdicated the throne. So you cannot say that the Pandavas were the kings at any stage. So Rajadharma really belonged to Duryodhana. He had a more legitimate case to be the heir to his kingdom, to his father's kingdom. And this essentially is the burden of the case that we present in Duryodhana's version. So therefore, then you say that, look, if both were equally grey, then why is Duryodhana supposed to be any more wild than anybody else? Now, if you look at Karna, caste system in those days was not by birth. The original Varna system says it is by conduct that you achieve a certain Varna. And I would imagine that Dronacharya not taking Ekalavya as a student, or not taking, or Parashurama not taking Karna as a student, for instance, or not taking Karna, Dronacharya not taking Karna as a student because he was a son of a Sarathi and not a Kshatriya, for instance. They were really not practicing the Varna system right. So that is a huge sin, going by the arguments of that period, that at a time when Varna is decided by what you do, by your conduct and not by your birth, why should Dronacharya have refused to teach Karna? Because they were also being strategic, that if Karna was taught very well, then one day, because of his closeness to Duryodhana, they may have to face a much more empowered Karna someday in the future. So if it was a matter of strategy, then Duryodhana can turn around and say, I saw the future strategy much clearer than the Pandavas did. And that is the reason I wanted to kill them way ahead, so that we will avert the Kurukshetra kind of a war. So these are the kinds of arguments that go to and fro through the book, by which I say that Duryodhana was probably as grey a character as any. And this is one version which is possible to mine from the universe of Mahabharata. As I said, Mahabharata allows you to mine whatever conduct you want. And this is one kind of a mining that I have tried to do. I think I'll be happy to take questions. I think you're muted. Now I can't hear you, Mr. Arun Kumar.
Thank you very much. It was a totally different interpretation.
Yeah.
And some of us may like to agree with it, including me. So, any comments or questions?
I have one curiosity, and that is with this kind of approach and conduct of the Pandavas, why did Krishna choose to support them?
In fact, yes, that is a question I also ask in the book. That's a good question, because I say that, look, I use that to say that Vastraharan did not happen, because if Vastraharan did happen, why did Krishna have to wait till a woman's honor was nearly compromised? Why did he not step in much earlier? So if Krishna is supposed to be Lord Krishna, he did not have to wait for a woman to be almost be disrobed or dishonored to come to her rescue. So I twist it around as Ram Jethmalani to say that, sir, therefore, the circumstantial evidence are very, very strong to say that Vastraharan did not even happen, So that's a question that we do ask, that why did he wait that long? Which means probably they have written the history as they chose subsequently, but the facts were more incidental. To know exactly how I interpret Vastraharana, please get a copy of the book and read, because we won't have the time to do it here. It's available on Amazon easily.
Yes.
Yeah. Or your nearest library may also have.
No, it's easily available on Amazon.
Yes.
Also, his other book, Irrationally Rational.
Right.
That is the latest one.
Yes.
about Nobel laureates.
That's right.
And
10 Nobel laureates script the story of behavioral economics. How behavioral economics emerged from neoclassical economics, because the way we used to read economics was the most boring way of reading economics. 3 baje dopahr ko class lagti thi, and you had demand curves going up or down. One got mad, and economists believed that psychology and economics had nothing to do with each other.
yes.
Whereas gradually they came to recognize, if it's talking about people, how can you take away the people's intellect away from people's decisions? So you had to willy-nilly put the economics together with psychology if you wanted to understand the decision making of human beings better. So that is the entire story that this book captures.
Yes.
Sir, if permitted, may I?
Please, sir.
Am I allowed?
Yes. Yes.
सर कोई निवेदन करूं सर मैं?
हाँ विशा जी आप
सर आई वांट टू जस्ट ऐड, बहुत अच्छा आपने उदाहरण दिए सर. दिस करेक्टर ऑफ दुर्योधन very much elaborated in Sanskrit natak and Sanskrit literature, and never Duryodhan word is there in Sanskrit literature. Everywhere it is Duryodhan only, and Susala, Dushashasan.
Sushasan. It was Sushasan.
सुशासन सुशला, उसकी बहन का नाम जो दुशला कहा गया है, सुशला है, सुशीला के नाम से वही है सब जगह पर. इवन माघ ने भी यही वर्णन किया है. कर्ण की मृत्यु पर मैं बता रहा हूं, अश्वत्थामा ने प्रतिज्ञा की थी, जब तक कर्ण सेनापति है मैं शस्त्र नहीं उठाऊंगा.
करेक्ट.
और कर्ण के मृत्यु के बाद अश्वत्थामा दुर्योधन जो नीचे गिरे हुए थे, जंघा पर प्रहार हो चुका था, उनके पास गए और उन्होंने कहा, अश्वत्थामा ने, निष्पांडवा मेदिनी, मुझे अनुमति दो, मैं युद्ध करूंगा और पांडव विहीन पृथ्वी को कर दूंगा. जिस मित्र पर तुम्हें गर्व था, वह मित्र को तो अर्जुन ने मार दिया और अब वो कुछ नहीं कर सकता. तुम कर्ण पर गर्व करते थे. दुर्योधन के चरित्र का उच्चता देखें. तुम प्रतिज्ञा करो कि जब तक मैं जीवित हूं तब तक शस्त्र नहीं उठाओगे, क्योंकि तुम्हारे मेरे मित्र के यश रूपी यश को नष्ट करने का प्रयत्न किया है तुमने. मैं मेरे मित्र का अपमान सहन नहीं कर सकता. उसके भौतिक शरीर को नष्ट किया है केवल उसने, और तुमने उसको आत्मा को नष्ट कर रहे हो. तुम जब तक नहीं उठाओगे तब तक मैं जीवित हूं और मैं तुम्हें सेनापति नहीं बनाता. यानी मित्र का अपमान सहन न करने का दुर्योधन का यह संकल्प, और उसके निष्पांडवा मेदिनी को भी उन्होंने मना कर दिया. जब उनके जंघा पर वार किया गया, जंघा पर वार करने के बाद में जब वो गिरा पड़ा था, तो बलराम आए और बलराम ने आकर के कहा उनको कि मैं अब इसको दंड दूंगा. भीम के पास जाकर के उन्होंने बहुत संस्कृत में अच्छा श्लोक किया है, यद्देव संवेशीमा छजति मे भो माम जिता. उन्होंने यद्यपि मुझे छल से जीता है, लेकिन आप मेरे गुरुदेव हो. गुरु ने कह दिया कि छल हुआ है तो मैं जीत गया.
करेक्ट.
अब वहां जाकर के उनकी विजय में संकट मत करो, विजय को उनको धूमिल मत करो. ये हमारे भाइयों का युद्ध है. आप अब तक नहीं थे, अब भी मन आए. बस मेरे गुरु ने कह दिया, मेरी जीत हो गई, मैं प्राण त्यागता हूं.
That's right.
ये उसका एक उदाहरण और मैं कहूंगा, निवेदन करूं. धृतराष्ट्र ने जब उसको समझौता करने के लिए कहा, 99 भाइयों की मृत्यु के पश्चात, 98 की, युद्धसुखी नहीं, तो उन्होंने कहा कि युधिष्ठिर यह कह सकता है कि एक पांडव की मृत्यु होने पर मैं अपना प्राण त्याग दूंगा, तो क्या मैं इतना निकृष्ट हूं कि 99 के पश्चात राज सिंहासन प्राप्त करूंगा? मैं राज सिंहासन प्राप्त नहीं कर सकता. और पिताजी, आपसे मुझे आशा नहीं थी कि आप ये बात कहोगे. संस्कृत में बहुत बड़ा श्लोक है इसके लिए. लास्ट में कहूंगा, जो कृष्ण की बात आई थी, उन्होंने कृष्ण को प्रश्न किया कुंती की भांति, जाना में धर्म न च में प्रवृत्ति, जाना में अधर्मम न च में निवृत्ति, केनापि देवेन हरिस्तेन यथा अनुक्तं तथा करोमि. मैं जानता हूं कि धर्म क्या है, मेरी प्रवृत्ति नहीं हुई, लेकिन मेरी अधर्म में प्रवृत्ति नहीं हुई. मुझे जिस अधर्म को तुम कहते हो, अधर्म मैंने नहीं किया है. मेरे धर्म को अधर्म कहना तुम गलत कर रहे हो, तुम देव हो तो बताओ तुमने मेरा देव ऐसा क्यों बनाया।
Sir,
इस
you
तरह
are
के
too
जो
scholarly.
दुर्योधन के जो चरित्र है वो बहुत ही उच्च लेवल पर जाता है। संस्कृत के नाटकों में बहुत अच्छा वर्णन किया गया है, बड़े बड़े श्लोक है, उसको इस समय नहीं है। मुझे बहुत खुशी हुई सर आपने जो ये बताया, थैंक यू।
You are very scholarly yourself. I mean, compared to that, mine is more down to earth. I'm not as scholarly, half as scholarly as you are.
Thank you very much, Bisaji.
Thank you, sir.
Manoj sir wants to ask.
Thank you.
Can I? Right? Yeah. Thank you very much for giving us this the totally different dimension about Duryodhan's personality that what we have been taught right since the childhood. So, if you were to just Mahabharata is a mythology, you have said it is not necessary, not really a history thing. But if I were to apply in the present times also, it is always the people in power who will write and will leave for the posterity what they think is right according to them. Whosoever is, they'll paint different people in different shades. Indira Gandhi put a time capsule in the earth, which was probably taken out by the other party. Presently, also the media, 90% media does something else, and then we normally form an opinion about it. And you rightly said there is a lesson for us. I think at least I think it is a lesson for me also, that we should not paint anybody in white or black. Everybody has some shades of white, some shades of black. There is a gray shade, and we normally tend to paint people either totally white.
That's
But
right.
it is happening in the present day politics all day in and day out. So maybe if they would learn a lesson from your book and presume that even a person who is known as a thoroughly a villain by all people in the childhood they have learned, but even then there are some shades, there are possibilities of him being also a person with the rightful deeds at different points of time according to his point of view. Thank you very much for giving this way to look at things. I think I only hope that everybody in the administration and maybe also in politics takes a clue from this, and the world would be slightly different.
Very right. You are very right. I have even said in the book that the only place where a person is all good or all bad is in Hindi movies. The hero is all good and the villain is all bad. देखेगा भी तो ऐसे करके देखेगा villain है तो, और अगर everything about the villain will be bad. But in real life, as you rightly say, we are all a mix of. Every human being has a good and bad, both in them, and they are gray. And we need to distinguish which shade of gray they are. And so that's it.
So, but this quality needs to develop. We all need to deal with another person considering his 1 or 2 plus points also, if there are any, and there are always with somebody. Thank you, Pastor. Thank you very much.
अच्छा, कुमार साहब कुछ पूछना चाह रहे हैं? अनम्यूट कर दीजिए. हाँ.
Yeah. Thank you for such a nice talk today. आपने एक जगह कहा कि ये पांडव के बच्चे जो हैं, they had no right in the kingdom, क्योंकि वो पांडव के बच्चे ही नहीं थे, और दूसरा कि जो राइट है वो दुर्योधन का था. तो फिर उनको ये हस्तिनापुर वगैरह बना करके क्यों दिया गया अलग से?
No, it's like this. Just because out of a goodness of my heart I give you something, it doesn't become your right. So the point is, Duryodhana's case is, I've already done enough for them. They came into our refuge, we took care of them. They were making a big noise about wanting a share of of the kingdom. I said, okay, we will, because my father insisted. Dhritarashtra was a slightly weaker person, and because he called Duryodhana and said, look, let us give this piece of land to them, and they gave them jungle, which these people, with the help of their own enterprise or whatever, made it into a very happening place, Indraprastha and so on. But the story there is, he did it because Dhritarashtra wanted to do it. But that doesn't become a matter of right. At least that is the interpretation that I take in the book.
तिवारी साहब,
नहीं, उसके बाद उन्होंने कहा था, जब ये उनको अज्ञातवास दिया, तो उसके बाद कहा था कि जब अज्ञातवास पूरा हो जाएगा उसके बाद आपको ये राज वापस दे दिया जाएगा. तो वो तो फिर उन्होंने बात पूरी नहीं की ना.
No, you're right. As I said, both sides did a lot of not keeping their words. The way Duryodhana was killed, was not right. The
No,
way
sir.
Ashwathama was killed was not right. So the point here is, all through, Duryodhana wanted not to give them the kingdom without a war. At least he didn't want to kill 1 million people. But Pandavas were willing to kill 1 million people, and Krishna seems to support that. And that is a flip side of, if you were the defense attorney for Duryodhana, that is how you would play the cards. That's all. See, it's just a fun exercise in my mind. I am not genuinely reinterpreting Mahabharata, especially for people who believe in it in a certain way. But I am saying that if I were looking at it from a modern day lens, I would turn it around and say that, look, everything was strategy. In strategy, chal kapat is also part of a strategy. You see, in any strategy, unless there is a little bit of deception, it is not a strategy. I'll tell you a story. There is a story of a guru and a shishya. दोनों बहुत बड़े धुरंधर थे तलवारबाजी में. तो once the student thought कि मैं गुरु से आगे बढ़ गया हूं, तो उन्होंने गुरु को चैलेंज कर दिया, स्टूडेंट ने. तो टीचर को लगा कि यार अब तो इसको कुछ थोड़ा ह्यूमिलिटी भी समझानी पड़ेगी, क्या करें. तो उसने कहा, साहब आपकी 80 साल की उम्र हो गई है, you know, I am at the peak of my youth, how will you fight me? Guru said, don't worry, let us fix a date. So they fixed a date a month later. So then what happened is, walking around, the student noticed कि हफ्ते भर बाद उसने देखा गुरुजी की म्यान थोड़ी लंबी लग रही है. तो उसने कहा, अरे ये तो गुरु समझ गया वो कि वो लंबी तलवार लेके आएंगे, so his reach will be higher. तो उसने खुद भी लंबी तलवार से प्रैक्टिस करना शुरू कर दिया. फिर हफ्ते बाद वापस देखा उसने, तलवार और थोड़ी लंबी दिखी. तो उसने कहा, अच्छा तो गुरुजी और लंबी कर रहे हैं तलवार, तो मैं भी और लंबी तलवार कर लेता हूं. तो वो लंबी तलवार लेके प्रैक्टिस शुरू कर दी. महीने भर बाद में जब दोनों आमने सामने आए, दोनों की म्यानें जो थी तकरीबन 20-20 फुट लंबी थी. अब वो मैदान में उतरे और घंटी जैसे ही बजी के चलो स्वordबाजी शुरू कीजिए, तो वो स्टूडेंट बेचारा 20 फुट का तलवार म्यान में से निकालता रहा और गुरुजी ने 6 इंच का उसमें से कटार निकाला, उसने भून दिया. Okay, now what does it say? It would not have been a strategy had there not been a small element of deception. Even when a corporate body does a certain strategy, there is an element of deception. Without deception, if the competition tells the competition that I am going to decrease my price to kill your product, where is the strategy? But you do it such that the competition doesn't even realize it till it is too late. So an element of chal kapat is part of strategy, especially in statecraft. So what you and I say, he did not keep his word, Duryodhana will say that was statecraft. At least it would have saved 1 million lives. It would have saved 500,000 women from becoming widows, or 2 million children from becoming orphans. So we can interpret it the way we want. That's why I said Mahabharata is a mine. You can mine what you want. It's a universe from which you can mine what you want.
You are so right, Professor Raghunathan, because this lesson that there can be deception and lies in strategy, this is something that our democratic leaders are following so carefully.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely right. You are so, in fact, I have actually written these lines in the book. Politicians have learned this art better than anybody else.
तिवारी साहब, आपको कुछ पूछना था?
Yes, sir. Well, sir, Professor sir, I thank you very much. You played the role of devil's advocate so admirably well. Perhaps Ram Jethmalani would not have ventured into this area the way you did it. But I have certain points, certain observations to make. First, you consider Duryodhan as the legitimate ruler and king. Nowhere in the Mahabharata says Duryodhan was a king. It was at that point of time. Whether Pandu Gojar, just listen to me. It was Dhritarashtra. It was Dhritarashtra who was the, just like that, who was the king, not the Duryodhan. Now the first point is Dhritarashtra became a puppet in the hands of Duryodhan. Do you think it is a statecraft? Now, second is that you question, and you very interestingly and very with a great argument, you said Ram Jethmalani would say a woman just walked into a courtroom and says, I have 5 sons and they're all illegitimate. No? They're not her. Now here, sir, can you think Duryodhan can have 100 sons by any stretch of imagination? Can he have 100? And who is legitimate, who is not legitimate? Was Duryodhan himself legitimate? How Duryodhan was born? How Pandu was born? There's a big story in the Mahabharata. So the point of legitimacy applies to both. But, sir, as today, that time also, Niyog was the perfect, acceptable way of producing children. That was the way. So they all, let's assume, because if 5 persons can be born to a woman, but 100 sons can't be born to Gandhari by Duryodhana. So legitimacy point applies to both the points. Now, Duryodhan himself admits, Janame dharma, name pravartani, janame me adharma, name nivritani, as Bisa Sahib said. He knows, I know what is truth, what is religion, but I can't follow it. I know what is untruth, what is unrighteous, but I can't follow it. It's a big psychology, sir. Like Shylock, he was an unmitigated rascal. He knows, and still he can't win away from that. He can't take himself away from that. There are 6 traits described for an ataya, atrocious persons in the Shastras. 1, who kills somebody by burning. 2nd, one who kills or tries to kill somebody by poisoning. 1 who tries to kill somebody by drowning. And 1 who unlawfully usurps or takes away or steals someone's wealth or someone's land or someone's wife. All these apply to Duryodhana. He tried to kill them by poisoning, by throwing in water, if you know the Bhim. They killed the children of Pandava in Lakshagraha. That's it. So all the traits which are said in the scriptures apply to him. Still, if you want to make him a role model, what are those? As far as the Chal Kapat is concerned, there are rules of warfare also. Dharma Yudh, there is a rules of warfare. Even like today, there are rules of warfare. You can't attack civilians. You can't attack hospitals. Now they are doing it. So after unlawful and absolutely cruel and merciless killing of Abhimanyu, when all the so-called great warriors killed the lone boy, all the rules were broken. And then the real Chal Kapat, and there was no holds barred. That started thereafter, for which Duryodhan was responsible. And sir, you said Duryodhan never wanted war. It was Duryodhan. Otherwise, why he was sent? Pandavas were forced to play a gamble. Gambling was never allowed. Of course, for pleasure they can do, but at no point of time gambling was a lawful activity. And since they were rulers, they could go scot-free with that. And then one verse Agyatvas, and when they came back after passing through all this, then Duryodhan said, he could have said the same first go. Why 12 years Vanvas? Why 1 year Agyatvas? So, as far as the legitimacy of Duryodhan as a ruler, as a king is concerned, he was no more ruler. He was no more king. And who was the real ruler? We go by the law and we go by the interpreters of the law. In our case, IPC, RPC, CPC, or civil laws and judges. At that point of time, scriptures were the Shastras, were the law, and interpreters were like Vidur, Bhisma, etc. Kripacharya, Duryodhana. They said the legitimate ruler, the rightful king, is Pandu. Of course, he abdicated for certain reasons, and he was just a caretaker, pro tem ruler. Duryodhana again, not Dhritarashtra, not Duryodhana. Duryodhana has absolutely no right from any corner. How can we make him a role model?
Thank you, Dyaji. Thank you very much.
fact, that is what Mahabharata says. In fact, what you are saying is what Mahabharata says. I am just giving a counter view.
It's what Mahabharata says. It's exactly.
Any other comment or observation?
तिवारी जी ने इतनी अच्छी बात बताई है for दुर्योधना and पांडवा both. मेरा मानना यह है कि इतना अधर्म जब दोनों तरफ से देखा कृष्ण ने, छल भी था, कपट भी था, क्या नहीं था महाभारत में, कभी उन्होंने गीता का पाठ पढ़ाया। अगर इतना नहीं होता तो गीता का जन्म नहीं होता। गीता का जन्म नहीं होता तो आप और हम आज धर्म का रास्ता शायद देख नहीं पाते। मेरे ख्याल से एसेंस ऑफ महाभारत इज दैट स्टेट क्राफ्ट आल्सो एवरीथिंग हैपन। जैसे आप छल कपट कुछ भी कह लीजिएगा, तो पब्लिक ये नहीं समझे कि स्टेट क्राफ्ट या रूलर जो है वो हमेशा सही होता है। पब्लिक ये नहीं समझे रूलर जो भी करता है वो जनता के हित के लिए करता। मैं आजकल के रूलर की बात नहीं कर रहा हूँ, मैं महाभारत की बात कर रहा हूँ कि वो हमेशा जनता के भले की बात करे, ये सत्य नहीं है,
सत्य नहीं है।
और इसीलिए कृष्ण ने भगवान का रूप धारण करके आपके हमारे सबके लिए गीता का किया। गीता अर्जुन को नहीं सुनाई थी उन्होंने, उसको उस टाइम आपको मालूम है कि उन्होंने सूर्य की गति रोक दी थी, समय का चक्र रोक दिया था और सब कुछ रोक दिया था जब तक कि गीता खत्म नहीं हुई। एक्चुअली महाभारत बनी ही गीता के लिए थी और कृष्ण का जो जन्म है वो गीता की वजह से हुआ था और गीता कह के कृष्ण अमर हो गए। ये मेरा सोच है।
Absolutely right. I listen to Bhagavad Gita as a podcast when I walk in the mornings, and believe me, one of the most profound philosophical treatises ever written. ये अलग बात है कि आजकल we say so and so philosopher, such and such philosopher, and so on, and this is more like a scripture, but essentially it contains the humanity's wisdom in one place. So if one reads it carefully,
रघु जी आपको कभी टाइम मिले तो आपका ज्ञान और श्री बिस्सा जी का, तिवारी जी का और जैसे और ज्ञानी हैं उनको मिला के एक बार गीता पे भी प्रवचन हो जाए तो हम जैसे अनपढ़ आदमी और उसका लाभ उठा लेंगे। नरेंद्र आयोग
गुड आइडिया वेरी गुड। बिस्सा जी सर, और कोई नहीं है तो फिर आप धन्यवाद प्रेषित करें रघु जी को।
Thank you very much, sir. On behalf of All India Services Rajasthan Pension Association, I am thankful to Sri Raghunathan Sahab for putting up that very different picture of Duryodhana, and which is very much illustrated in Sanskrit Nataks and all that. So this right view, you presented this actually. And for Mahabharata it is said, inne hasti tatratra, inne hasti tatratra pujit. जो महाभारत में है वो सब जगह है, महाभारत में नहीं है वो कहीं भी नहीं है, इस तरह कहा जाता है. And you put up that point of view also. I am very much thankful, and this prompted me also to read this book in full. And just I'm placing order to Amazon for reading that book actually. Thank you very much, sir. And I request you please come again.
मैं एक बात कहना चाहूंगा, अगर आपकी परमिशन हो तो। जैसे अभी स्पीकर ने डिसरोग के भगवान कृष्ण जानते थे या लॉर्ड कृष्ण, तो अंतिम समय में क्यों आए, और ये जो घटना है ये एक कोई बुक किताब का इंस्टेंस देके बताया कि ये चीर हरण की घटना हुई नहीं। तो जो भगवान अपने खुद के जीवन में ही जब तक संपूर्ण सरेंडर नहीं होता है, द्रौपदी को अपने पतियों पे भीष्म वगैरह बैठे थे, उन सब पे पूर्ण विश्वास था कि वो उसकी रक्षा करेंगे, और खुद पे भी था तो वो अपने कपड़ों को ढकती रही। लेकिन जब वो सबका विश्वास खत्म हो गया तो अंत में जाके कृष्ण को पुकारा तो कृष्ण आए। तो ईश्वर तभी आता है जब संपूर्ण सरेंडर होता है, व्यक्ति के जीवन में भी और द्रौपदी के जीवन में भी यही हुआ। और गजेंद्र की भी की एक कथा आती है, जब गजेंद्र पूरा डूब रहा था, मगरमच्छ उसका पांव खींच रही थी, तो जब तक उसकी शक्ति पे हाथी को विश्वास था तब तक नहीं आया, पूरा डूबा और फिर नारायण को पुकारा, तब जो है नारायण अवतरित होके उसको जो है मगरमच्छ को मारा। तो पूर्ण समर्पण जब तक नहीं होता ईश्वर नहीं आता है। यही द्रौपदी के साथ थी और यही हर व्यक्ति के साथ होता है। साक्षात्कार पूर्ण सरेंडर होने पर ही हो सकता है।
Just one observation, you have said it beautifully. I couldn't agree with you more, sir. The only thing I have tried to say is, why would I want to believe that those were the days when there were such big people around? Why would we want to believe that a woman was dishonored? I would rather believe that a woman was not dishonored. I would rather believe in a society which did not dishonor women than believe in a society in the presence of Krishna and Bhishma Pitama and Dhritarashtra and so many big people, Kripacharya and Dronacharya, that a woman was dishonored. So I have taken the more plausible route with so many good people present, with nothing in the background of Duryodhana ever saying that he was an abuser of women. I've tried to give a picture that a woman in India, ancient India, was not dishonored. So that's the counter view. I'm not saying it's a correct view. I'm just saying it's a counter view.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
Raghuji, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure being with all of you. And of course, your kind of audience is very different. You are all mostly scholarly yourself. And, it's like taking a refrigerator to Alaska to sell. So, I was just talking because you called me to talk. Thank you so much.
Very, very interesting session we had. Thank you. Thanks to everybody. Thanks to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.